Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen. This week, a very special guest for Sci-Fi Week, none other than Ralph Morse. Ralph, thank you so much for joining us this week.
My pleasure, Joseph. Nice to see you.
Same here, and it's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to kind of take a little deep dive into your wonderful decorated career. You've done so much. Growing up, first and foremost, what were some of the hobbies as a child? And maybe some of the first films that you watched.
Well, I think I was an only child. I mean, I think that's a good starting point. And we lived in a small village, and it was a nice village to live in. Unfortunately, there weren't many children near me, so I was quite left a lot to my own devices, you know. And because of that, I got heavily, first of all, into cartoons. I think the Flintstones was the first thing I vividly remember. And then my dad gave me plasticine, Harbert's plasticine. I don't know if you remember that. The little strands of plasticine in different colours. And I started to make things. Oh. Of course, I was born in 1955, so the space race was already in progress by the time I was born. And so was rock and roll music. That's another story. But I think what really kicked me off was a puppet program by Gerry Anderson called Four Feather Falls. It was a series. It was the first series they made that was kind of like properly structured. It wasn't little short snippets. These were 15-minute episodes and featured a sheriff of a small town, which became known as Four Feather Falls. And this sheriff had a hat, and on his cowboy hat, very similar to the Johnny Cash one, had four feathers in it. And these four feathers were given him by an Indian chief because he'd saved the Indian chief's little boy, and they were magic feathers. And two of those feathers meant he could talk to his horse and his dog. And two other feathers made his guns work independently. So when it was told to stick his hands up, his guns would still shoot. Right. It was a puppet series, but it was fantastic. It was to have I didn't know at the time, but it was going to have a very profound influence because, as you can see over here, you can see this fellow, Johnny Cashbox. Oh, here he is as a action man. There he is. Johnny Cashbox is a time-traveling, guitar-slinging space cowboy, and he's my alter ego. So that's where it really started. And then, of course, we had the Yuri Gagarin and the John Glenn stuff going into space, and that was interesting. That gave birth to a series of puppet programs, again by Gerry Anderson, Thunderbirds and Fable XL5 and Supercar and Stingray, Captain Scarlet. They all were sci-fi based. And, of course, we had Doctor Who and Star Trek. All those acted upon me as a young child. But the theatre was slightly different. I just loved acting because it meant that as a small child, I was then able to get little puppets from Pelham Puppets. There was a puppet manufacturer, and started putting on my own shows. Now, because they were puppets, I was doing the voices, I was making the set, I was creating all the scripts and everything. So it really kick-started my interest in theatre, which, of course, has gone on, and it's still there. So that's where I started.
And why don't you tell us about Johnny Cashbox as
well? Sorry?
I was just saying, if you want to elaborate on Johnny Cashbox, tell us all about
it. Well, I went into the theatre, as I think you know. I went into the theatre. I trained as an actor and a singer at Rosebroof College. And in my second to last year there, I got to tour with Jesus Christ Superstar. It was an interesting production. I was playing Caiaphas. I don't know if you know it, Jesus Christ Superstar. It's the bass part. Understand it. So I was touring. I toured Italy and Austria and things with a group of young people as Caiaphas. The guy in the pit with me, the lead guitarist, when I left drama school and I was doing all sorts of things, we formed a band. That kind of kick-started another progression. I had a series of bands within my acting career. I had a series of bands that I sang with. And basically, that was another strand to me, and I started writing songs. I wrote my first song when I was 14, which is fun enough was called Space Baby. It was about a boy who was fantasizing because he could see an imaginary space lady, probably Barbarella, probably Jane Fonda in Barbarella, and he had a fantasy about it. But I noticed the song I'd written was very close to a Mama Cass song. So I kind of got put off for a while. And then when I was in my second to last year at drama school, I started writing songs and been writing songs ever since. I'm getting on to your question, where does Johnny Cashbox come from? Well, I did that, and I've had a number of identities. I consider myself not to be so much a singer as a character actor. And this is the point. My characters become singers,
Sure.
but they're acting roles as much as anything else. And basically, I taught for many years, in addition to everything else I was doing. But in 2003, I left full time teaching and decided to take some of my characters on the road. This was a character called Outlaw, who was a country singer. So Johnny Cash songs were part of that. So were Hank Williams songs, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson, um, Don Williams. And I'd hardly started doing this. I'd been doing this for about 6 months or so, and Johnny Cash died. And I started getting requests to sing Johnny Cash songs, which I was quite happy to do. And people say, why don't you do a Johnny Cash tribute? Well, Johnny Cash was about 6 inches taller than me. I'm 5'9" on a good day,
Right.
176 centimeters on a good day. I don't look like him, and I'm not American. And I listened to some Johnny Cash people, and I thought, yeah, they're really rather good. And I quite like being my own character. So he kind of became Johnny Cash Box. Originally, I wanted to call him Cash Back, because the thing in England at that
Oh,
point was getting cash back from you can take
right.
it to the supermarket, you want some cash back. But I found there was an American blues group called the Cashbacks, so I thought that's not a good idea. So hence Johnny Cash Box.
Box.
And he started gigging and everything, and it was going quite fine. I started using some of my more less spacey songs, and this was around. Excuse me. This was around the time that the whole convention stuff started to lift off a little bit, just into the millennium, with people started getting interested in things, and people knew that I had been in Star Wars, and I started getting invitations to go to conventions. And and this idea that, hang on a minute, maybe I should sing some of my space songs, because I'd written quite a few space songs before that, and the two things kind of morphed together. Hence, Johnny Cashbox was less Johnny Cash and is now, as I say, a time traveling space cowboy. He's got a whole backstory. Now, the interesting thing to that was, take it a stage further. I started singing at these convention things, and I had a friend in America, in your good country, um, in Virginia, who was an actor, and asked me to whether I would send a message to his good lady who was suffering from cancer. His name is Wesley. And I did. But something happened, and I don't to this day know exactly what happened here. I started writing this thing, and I was making it up as I went along initially, just trying to do some. And I then hit upon this idea: what if I tell a whole story? And what if this story features his good lady, and she becomes where all the roads lead? And this is where the secret came from. It's on YouTube, it ended up being teamed up with George Dibble of Elysium Productions, who kindly managed to get hold of permission to use some of the original Star Wars soundtrack. And I voiced all this on my own mobile phone as I wrote it, and it went down quite well. And it kind of, the relationship between Wes and his lady and myself kind of changed at one point, because I was then diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it became less about the fan and the artist. It was more about people following a similar pattern, similar problem with their lives, and we became good friends. And as a result of that, we started getting ideas together and culminating, oddly enough, in a production he was working on with Elysium Productions called Volkov, which is a story about it's a thriller, espionage and horror, about basically a Russian murderer, I guess you'd call him that, although that's not the whole story. And they made the pilot, and I wrote a couple of songs for it. And then then they had the opportunity, Lesson Productions, to extend that and make a whole movie of it. And they invited me to write the screenplay, which I did.
Wow.
And if you can see this, this is the T-shirt. If you can see that,
Oh
Volkov
yes.
Origin. And it's led on to other things. I've got when I was doing small parts and stuff in the cinema side of things early on, I through a very circuitous ended up in something that Michael Mann had produced called The Keep. It's I don't know if you know The Keep at all.
No.
It's basic. It's a group of German soldiers end up visiting Romania. Actually filmed in Wales, but it looks like Romania and it feels like Romania when you're there.
Hmm.
This creature of some kind has been imprisoned in the keep, because normally the keep is about keeping people out. In this case, it's to keep it in. And they've got these gold and silver stars all around and of course the Germans think, let's prize some of these off. And the problem is, one of them prizes this thing off, and it opens this chamber, and leads this evil spirit comes out. And I was a Wehrmacht soldier in that. And funnily enough, the reason I mention it is next week. Where are we? No, 15th. That's this week, isn't it? This coming
Yeah.
week, the 15th. A new boxed set of The Keeps coming out, I believe, and it features a documentary that I appear in. Following an interview I did with Stuart Buck, who's the director, in 2016. And again, because I used to carry a guitar with me wherever I went on films. I'm not never been a recording artist in the accepted sense. I've always gigged and I've always recorded what I've done, but I've never gone down that route. I had in 1982, I nearly did, but put it this way: the people who were interviewing me and thought that I might have a possibility working with them wanted me to be a kind of artist that I didn't want to be. So that was the end of that.
Yeah.
But I've always performed, and one of the songs that I wrote around that time was actually about what it felt like to be, filming The Keep. And it's actually going to appear on the soundtrack on the end credits of the documentary. So
Oh,
brings me
fantastic.
full circle, really.
That's great news, and we look forward to that for sure. When it comes to that process of writing music, writing a song like that, why don't you just kind of walk us through that, walk the fans through that?
Oh, I mean, okay, yeah. It depends what you're doing. Um, every single song is different. Sometimes it's something that inspires me. I would give you a Star Wars song as an example. I was filming The Empire Strikes Back. As you know, I was a stormtrooper and a snow trooper, a rebel soldier, and this character called Corporal Durdram. And started firing ideas, and I had this something came into my head, a title. I was thinking these little starfighters are very small, and they've got these big things fighting. And I thought, well, it's like one little thing on its own against all these things. And the title came into my head: Starfighters Hit Zero. Now, your sources that come to you are very. I guess one of the most exciting things for me was when David Bowie first appeared in his glam rock role. And he'd done Hunky Dory and other things, but the Ziggy Stardust image appeared, which of
Yeah.
course is again as a space character. And I thought that's a very exciting, sort of glamorous character, and I think that inspired me. And I believe it or not, I'm not going to try and do it now, but I did go through a David Bowie vocal phase. I know a lot of people do. I was never as good as David Bowie. I never had quite his range. I'm quite a bit deeper than him, but I did. And the Starfighter Hit Zero had some of the qualities of Bowie about it, and so that evolved from the title. And then I got the chord sequence. And with a band I was in, which called the Delegation at that point, I was playing through this song, and I used to have this mad idea, and I still do it. I go where the music takes me. I go where the lyrics take me. And I thought, this guy's trapped in space. Um, Maybe in the future, bearing in mind, I'm writing this in 1980, 81, something like this. I'm writing this song at a time when nobody knew how far the video thing was going to go. And I thought it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, in the future, if people don't know the difference between real events and video games? They don't know the reality. And wouldn't that be interesting? So in this particular song, the guy doesn't know whether he's in a real spacecraft fighting, the enemy, or whether he's in a computer game. That's the kind of thing he is fighting against his sense of reality. And it's called the Starfighter Sid Zero. So the lyrics came because of that situation. Other songs come differently. Another one, I've got loads of songs. I Shot a Jedi. No, this is interesting. It's a later song of mine. I thought, wouldn't it, I found myself, because people come and say, oh, well, you can't hit anything. You're a stormtrooper. You're useless. You can't hit anything. I thought, what if one of them could? We'd be quite smug about it, wouldn't he? He actually was the one to hit something. And I thought, well, that would be a good idea for a song. Not only that, I've got a blaster and they've got lightsabers. Now, logic tells me that, they're over there with their lightsaber. They can't touch me. I've got a blaster. I'm over here, but my blaster would travel. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the basis for the song. I got up this morning and I linked it about how I felt about being on the set. And one of the things is how uncomfortable the costume was, how you couldn't see through the damn thing.
Yeah.
And because the first helmet they ever gave me, which is a story in itself, the first helmet they gave me, I couldn't see through it. And I was supposed to run down this corridor with 3 other stormtroopers, and I kept bumping into things. Eventually, I fell over and landed on my face. I thought, oh gosh, this isn't going very far. And the assistant said, "What the hell's wrong with you?"
Huh.
And I thought, I'm going home, aren't I? And I said, I can't see. And he said, give me your helmet. And he looked at the helmet and he realised what had happened. You obviously know from your own experience in the cinema industry that when you've got things that have got like lenses in them, you push them in the wrong light and the light hits it from the camera. You can see the faces of the people taking the movie.
Right.
So he'd been asked one of the crew had been asked to clean up the lenses a little bit, so you couldn't see.
Yeah.
And he thought, okay, so he used Brasso, which is an abrasive, and he'd clean these lenses of Brasso. But they worked, yeah, because nobody you couldn't, but you couldn't see through the thing.
Right.
So that appeared in the song. I put it, we cut. It's hard to see it, can't see with your helmet on and everything. And then, of course, the character in it decides that he fancies the princess. He thinks she'll have a go at it. Try and pick up the princess. Then, of course, he remembers that she actually she sorted out Jabba the Hutt. So it's called "I Shot a Jedi" and it's a comic song. So there are songs like that, and then I write serious songs as well. I write songs about I would say, from a humanitarian perspective, I don't, I'm not trying to say that, one person is better than somebody else, or one country is better, one religion's better. But the basic fundamental fact with some of my songs is they're about how we treat each other. So there's that element to it. Then there are love songs as well.
Yeah.
And some of them, there's some saucy songs. One of the popular ones I've done is called, I don't know what you're trying to think. I didn't intend to write a Led Zeppelin song. I didn't intend to write a Led Zeppelin song, but I was farting around with this riff, and it was a little bit like Whole Lot of Love. Not quite, but a little bit. And a friend of mine said, you want to go and see this video? You'll like it. And it was by a Croatian, I think she is, singer called Lidja Basic Lil. And she's just a very curvaceous young woman. But she's a very good singer, and she moves very well, and she doesn't have to. She just looks incredibly attractive. And so I wrote this song about Johnny Cashbox being in space, and he gets his transmission, and it kind of blows his eyes out, and because this girl's wobbling all over the place. It was called All Over the Place. So I write those kind of songs. I just whatever comes into my head. I do write serious songs. I do write songs for people who ask me. A few years ago, I was approached by something which is very sensitive, I guess. I was approached by a women's refuge. Would I write a song for them? And I'm not going to go into too much of the details because, but Suffice to say, the young ladies I met had all been trafficked.
Ah,
So I wrote a song for them, uh, which is called Tales from the Big City, which is about, I tried to be subtle about it. And at the same time, there are these stories of soldiers coming back from various places. I know you have that situation in the States that, you know, as Lou Reed famously said, there's no Christmas in February. We celebrate, or we do what we can to help vets at Christmas, but they're disabled,
yeah,
they're emotionally torn all the year round. It doesn't happen just on Christmas Day. So I put a verse in there about the problems of being, soldiers coming back in England. So there's a whole range of stuff I do. How where they come from, it really sometimes somebody will say, "Can you write a song about this?" Or I'll be moved by something. When I was younger, I didn't really keep a diary, because you put something in the diary, and if you're somebody writes diaries, you can always find something to write about. But went to the bank, went and had a nice drink in the pub, really something to, not really great diary entry.
sure.
But a song not only reflects how you were feeling at that point, it also can do it in an abstract way that says a lot more than just a diary entry could ever say. So a lot of my songs are actually reflections of where I am at that particular point in my life.
Oh, wow. And let's talk about how iconic, obviously, Star Wars became. 1977, the very first one comes out. Nobody's expecting it to be as big as it actually had become. It became a classic right away. And basically, you came on board with part two,
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back, and then you were there again for three with Return of the Jedi. So being an iconic stormtrooper, at that point, it's such an iconic look, an iconic character. Obviously,
Mhm.
the helmet was created by Mr. Muir, I believe is how you
Yeah.
pronounce the name.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just an iconic look. What was it like to portray a stormtrooper? Once it was already an established franchise.
That's a very interesting question. I I remember going to the cinema. I can't remember. It was a trailer for what was then just called Star Wars, and I was with a friend who was an actor, and he went, "Oh wow, this is fantastic! Oh look at this, this is wonderful." And I thought, "What the hell is it?" I mean, my favourite film of all time, and I don't mind who knows this, is 2001: A Space Odyssey. It had such an impression on me because there's a spiritual element to it as well as the scientific element. There's the whole story. It's got three layers to it. It's like a symphony.
Yep.
And I looked at the special effects. So these are very good, but this is 8-9 years after uh, 2001. I'm thinking, well, I wasn't that impressed with it. I just thought it's another sci-fi thing at that time. At that time, and then of course it got round to how phenomenal this was going to be. I was playing King Lear in the theatre. I had my own theatre company. I was playing King Lear, and I used to do bits and pieces in cinema and in television, mainly to pay the bills, really. And I got a call to go and do a series called Dick Turpin, which was about the highwayman Dick Turpin. And I'd at that stage in my life had not really learned how to behave myself. Some people are in awe of actors, and writers, and things. I wasn't so much in awe of them. I admired them, but I think, oh, what's going on here? I'd like to know what's going on. So I was doing this thing called The Upright Man, which was an episode of Dick Turpin, and we were in a coach house in Hertfordshire. And I was thinking, oh, I'm getting a bit, what's going on? I want to go and see what's going on over there. So I went over to the set itself, which is like a coach house. And I went up to the director, I think was Charles Crichton, because I didn't really know how to behave myself, and said, "What do you want me to do?" An assistant flummoxed him and said, "Can you fall down those stairs for us?" It's like a circular staircase. And I tried, and I made a few abortive attempts at doing it, but wasn't very successful. And then the stuntman turned up. They thought I was the stuntman because I was all blacked up and false teeth and stuff. They look very much like the stuntman, and that could have been a bit nasty. But Peter Diamond, this is the point. Peter Diamond was a stunt director on Dick Turpin. He came up and saw me, and he'd been a RADA trained actor himself before he went into stunts. And he started chatting to me about things. He let me see a few setups. He said, "I will remember you." I thought, I remember you too. You say these things. A few weeks later, an agent offered me an audition for a film. He said the film is called The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I didn't know it was a Star Wars movie at all. Empire Strikes Back. I said, "What's it about?" He said, "You'll find out when you get there." Empire Strikes Back. Empire. Empire's India, isn't it? India, the Indian mutiny. It's got something that probably to do with the Indian mutiny. He wants to buy us as some kind of desk officer. I said, "Well, that's what it is. Be an Indian mutiny desk officer." Yeah, okay, I could do that. Went to Elstree Studios because, as you probably know, the first film was filmed at Pinewood,
Yeah.
but the Star Wars stage was built at Elstree in time for The Empire Strikes Back. And I saw this thing, it said Star Wars, and I didn't associate it with me at all. I thought, that's interesting, because you can audition anything. If you're on a studio, you don't know who the person is who's doing it, you get called in for an audition. It could be with anybody. So I'm sitting there, and they're talking about this role. It's a couple of days' work. And then I saw Peter Diamond, who I recognised, and he recognised me. He just smiled at me. And that was the end of it. I was kept waiting for about 20 minutes, and the assistant came back and said, "Can we have a word? If you do this part, it's a couple of days' work. But if you fancy being on for several months, you could possibly be a stormtrooper." And I think Peter Diamond came into play with that, because what actually happened is that I was involved in a lot of the stunt sequences, not as a stuntman, but because Peter felt like I could probably work with the stunt team.
Wow.
So that was how I got into the part of the Stormtrooper. But of course, like everybody else, you sense things going on, but you don't know really, even by then, how massive the legacy of these films was going to be, and how they were going to grow and grow. And I enjoyed. I mean, the funny thing was, I really enjoyed the people I was working with. I mean, Dave Prowse was so kind to me. Um, he and I used to have quite interesting conversations, mainly because we were standing together and doing things. I was one of his guys, and he saw me with a script one day, which is the script to King Lear, because I'm playing King Lear for the Causes Theatre Company. So I'm practicing my lines. And I didn't have the whole script. I had little bits that I'd taken out because you couldn't put it in your costume. So I had little bits like the speeches I was learning that day. And I found that the big speeches were far easier to learn than all the smaller speeches, when you've got one after the other, and you can get lost in those. And I started chatting about it, and he started talking about them. Then we took a break, and we went outside the studio doors, and we were walking around chatting. And he told me about how he wanted to be Superman. And he told me the story of how they didn't want an Englishman, they wanted an American actor, and how he had trained Christopher Reeve for the role. And I thought, this guy's a really special bloke. No, there was no bitterness about the fact they hadn't chosen him or anything. And then he said to me, I was really touched by this. He said, "You want to come down my gym, see? I'll train you up, build you up." And unfortunately, I didn't take him up in his office because I got work, But that was a fantastic experience for me. And meeting Tony Daniels was another one, because Tony Daniels went to Rose Bruford as well, so you got to talk about that. I really enjoyed those, but because I was preoccupied with learning my lines, I probably didn't get involved in as much as some of the others did.
And
Fantastic, though. It was absolutely fantastic experience.
and getting to know David Prowse a bit there, what was he like as a man? What was David Prowse like?
Gentle Giant. He was not. He wasn't a natural actor. He was just a very good person, and he wanted to stretch himself. And he'd kind of played the monsters in Frankenstein movies and stuff, and he'd been the bodyguard in Clockwork Orange. I worked with him on several things actually. One of them was kind of interesting because it was between the Empire and the Return of the Jedi, which was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I played the young scientist who solves the solution to the infinite probability generator, then gets lynched because nobody likes a smart ass. That's basically my part. Um, so there were 6 episodes. Six, that's right, 6 episodes. And I was in the second episode. And then they had a big thing called The Restaurant at the End of the Universe for the 6th episode of the television series. And Dave was playing the bodyguard in that. And we met up again because I this time I was an extra and I had a big rubber head on my, to move around in because I was just another character. But I saw this rather glamorous brunette, very attractive. And I started, I guess you'd say I was chatting her up. Um, I wasn't doing it in any sort of, I wasn't doing it in a nasty way, just being friendly, if you see what I mean. And she said, "Oh, you'll know my David then." I said, "Why?" She said, "He's in Star Wars." "Really?" "Played Darth Vader." "Hello." He's standing behind me. And, he was just such a sweet guy. I miss him. I miss him terribly. He's such a
Yeah.
nice man.
I did have the honor of meeting him. This was probably about 10 years ago, and it was a very pleasant experience. That is for sure.
It
You know,
was. I mean,
other,
sorry, you carry on.
oh no, go right ahead.
Well, the sadness when I mean, I have never met, I've never had the pleasure or the honour, and I would say it would be both a pleasure and an honour to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I know he's had his fair share of physical problems, as has Sylvester Stallone. But Dave was riddled with arthritis, which of course, is Leonard Cohen says in one of his songs. One of my favourite Leonard Cohen songs is, "All my friends are gone and my hair is grey, but I ache in the places where I used to play." It's true. Bodybuilders and sports people, their bodies are put through so much and they crack up. As they
Yeah.
get older, they begin to fall to pieces. And his decline was terrible, quite honestly, because he was such a fantastic guy.
Now, do you know why when Vader was unmasked? Do you know why it wasn't David? It was somebody else for one scene only.
Sebastian Shaw. Well, the reason for that, I would, okay. Do you know you know Joseph? I was in that in a particularly interesting shot at that point. Um, I think the decision was made, um, but it began way back with James Earl Jones. I think David asked her, "Why can't I do the voice for Darth Vader?" No, so he wasn't an actor, and he had a very Bristol West Country kind of voice, and that probably wouldn't have worked for Darth Vader. He had a very distinctive look, Dave, and I think they wanted somebody with a little bit more weight as an actor than Dave had, which is why they chose Sebastian Shaw. But the sad thing there, and it's something that it still troubles me. Myself and a guy called Richard Bonehill, um, and two or three other stormtroopers were pulled off to do a scene. And we were kind of confused by this scene because it looked like it was going to be some kind of ridiculous fantasy. It was almost comical. There's a thing stormtroopers do. Um, those helmets are very delicate. They take a bump, they can split down the side or down the back here. And the problem with that is they then become loose. And if you go, the head will spin. Well, the head doesn't spin round, but the helmet will spin round. It looks like your head's spinning round. And they got us to do a few fight things like that and a few other things and dancing sillily and really being quite daft. And we got slightly confused by that. And Dave was in this scene and we're all getting into this. We discovered later that, it wasn't quite what it seemed. They needed to get Dave away from the main stage and they set up this sequence that was never used in the film. It wasn't intended to be used in the film. It was just simply to get him away. So he didn't know. He didn't know what was happening with Sebastian Shaw,
Oh
and that
wow.
I think was the beginning of the big row between him and George Lucas. Um, I mean, I try and see both sides of that. From Dave's point of view, it's very upsetting. At the one time, he thought his face would be seen in being camera, and everybody would forever associate that with Darth Vader, and him was taken from him. and I could understand why he felt how he felt cheated about that and how badly he felt he was treated. However, from George Lucas's point of view, he's carrying the weight of these films, and he just needs to do with the films what he needs to do to get the end result that he needs to get the films out there.
Yeah.
And that was to actually be involved in that that filming. It still troubles me a bit.
Yeah.
It still troubles me a bit.
When it comes
I
to the
don't.
Stormtrooper, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm just thinking. I don't even know if there was any film in the camera. To be honest with you, because I don't know. They didn't see any rushes of it or anything. We just
Yeah.
assumed there was film in the camera because he went through the whole sequence he would normally go through with the second assistant. Sorry, the first assistant director. Even to this day, I don't know if any footage of that exists at all. But that's what
Wow.
it was. Um, it's very sad.
So when it comes to the Stormtrooper costume itself, how long are you in it? How long are these scenes going? What's a day look like for you? How long are you there filming? And what are the costumes made out of roughly?
Oh gosh, I'm oh gosh. It appeared to be some kind of hardened plastic substance of some kind. They're much flimsier than you'd think they would be, and then they're all different. People say, "Well, I mean, not I'm talking about the standard stormtrooper costume." I've done interviews over the years, and people say, "Asking, well, the helmet you wore for the Return of the Jedi, how is that different in its structure? Blah blah to what you wore." And basically, I couldn't tell you the difference really, other than by the time I got into the the Return of the Jedi, there was a lot more padding in it. It was a much more comfortable thing to wear. It was a bit tighter, but it was more comfortable. What was it like? Uh, okay, if I begin with the process of getting into this thing, I had been cast as a stormtrooper. I wasn't the first stormtrooper, obviously, because there was a film before us, and I wasn't the first stormtrooper on The Empire Strikes Back either. And I just remember the first thing I go into the room, I go into this room, and it's like, I don't know, it's like looking at cadavers. It's like going to a butcher's freezer and seeing all the various parts of the animal hanging about. This is what you saw with the stormtrooper. So you saw that you had the hanging over the back of a chair. I think was it on a hanger, the leotard and the roll. That was separate. And then you had the shoulder pieces, the two lots of leg pieces, the crutch piece, the bit at the back, the bit at the front, and all the other bits in between, and the gloves and stuff, and the boots. And it was that was the point at which I think it was probably the second. I think it was towards the beginning of the second day that I got into this costume first off, and I remember looking, thinking, "This is something iconic about this. There's just something about it." And you helped each other into it. And the first, I mean, I've got I've tried umpteen helmets on, but the first one I was given, and the ones for that particular for the Empire, you put them on and you twisted them into shape. You couldn't put it on the proper way. You had to turn it on sideways. Subsequently, you could do that, but you couldn't with the initial. So you put these on and you were quite aware of the restrictions placed upon you. They were quite uncomfortable. And Chris Bunn, who was the original Stormtrooper, I don't know if you got a chance to interview Chris Bunn, but he's an interesting person to talk to.
No.
He was the model and he was the first Stormtrooper, and he's 5'10", 5'10" and a half, something like that, and I'm 5'9". So the stormtrooper costume wasn't ridiculously uncomfortable for me. But if you were, say 6'2", or you were 5'7" or 5'8", it was quite uncomfortable. Um, I didn't have a problem particularly. We had one problem. Going to the bathroom, you have to unravel yourself. You couldn't sit down, and you kind of had to make adjustments to things. So it was like, I guess it was like watching the knights of old with their suits of armor, where between
Right.
the jousting bits they've got their leg over here and they're having a pint of beer and stuff. Um, the costume itself that I had, as I say, depending on where I was standing, some of my costumes were better than others. If I was in the forefront of the action, I would get a nice costume. If I was, one of the ones in the corner, then I'd get what I was given. If you see what I mean, because
Yeah,
you're not in close shot focus. One of the things that I, because I did a lot of Bespin shops, I did quite a few kneeling shots. There aren't that many, but there are. You watch the films, you'll see there are a few Stormtrooper kneeling shots.
sure.
You couldn't bend your legs because you got the calf pieces and the knee pieces and the thigh pieces, and it's a. I don't know if you ever think of Action Man. You can only bend your legs so far. It doesn't go any further than that. With
Right.
those things, it was almost impossible. So when I had to kneel, they came and cut me out of it. They cut part of the calf so I could kneel, and then they rebuilt me. That's an interesting thing to happen.
Huh.
And that happened a few times at Bespin. But the other thing that happened is, I say, I was not a stuntman. I've fallen over enough times, but I was not a stuntman. But I was involved heavily with the stunt team for the reasons I've given you. Now, occasionally, a big stunt was required. It wasn't just falling over; it was flying through the air, and we've seen those in the stuntmen. They had rubber costumes, which I'd say they were some kind of racer, but they were rubber costumes, so they could land more softly. So when they fell over in those situations, they were prepared. When I fell over, I wasn't, and I hurt myself. And I had a few of those, but one example that always amuses me was in the Return of the Jedi. It was just the evacuation of the second Death Star, when you see all these stormtroopers running down the corridor. At their feet are, I guess, they're electronic cars that have been made up to look like little box droids. That gives you a sense of anxiety, panic, and movement in the scene. So I'm running down. I still can't see very well. Catch my foot on one of these little robot things, androids, fly through the air, crash against the studio wall, and collapse in a heap on the floor.
Wow.
The crew rush to the aid of the poor little droid, because this is something that is part of the film. This isn't a person. This is a delicate little piece of engineering, and I've just screwed it up. So you kind of get an idea of how important the Stormtrooper is compared with the technology that they're using.
Right.
But yeah, the costume was, and as I said, the thing with the helmet I couldn't see was a bit pretty uncomfortable. Um, I have I have very fond memories of the whole thing. I mean, it sounds like I'm complaining, but it's quite funny falling over. It hurts at the end. But it is quite funny because it I don't know. It's like turning over in a submarine.
Right.
Got all the stuff around you, and you can't do much about it, and you're moving inside this thing.
Yeah.
But it was an experience. I don't regret having had that opportunity at all.
Now, a lot of people joke about the aim of the stormtroopers when they're firing their weapons. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think they never connect? It's very rare.
Well, they're not the heroes, are they?
Well, this is
I mean,
true.
when you've got heroes, if you had 17 heroes and one villain, it would look pretty inept, wouldn't it? It would be like, oh, look, it's not really a hero, is it? It's 17 of them. One poor little, that's back to the Starfighters Hit Zero bit.
Right.
I think you've got to make the heroes look like heroes. As for their aim, well, it's kind of interesting because if you dive into the films and into the plots and into the things that people do, and people can get quite critical of the writing. But you have to understand that these things evolve, and as things evolve, films get cut, edited, and it's very difficult to get all the corner pieces necessarily together. But I think the basic, as Alec Guinness says at the beginning when Obi-Wan talks about they're very precise, the stormtroopers in A New Hope. I think he's talking about sand troopers or something. He's saying how precise they are, and they're not.
Yeah.
We like the idea of these guys charging at you, being quite intimidating,
Right.
and they're all flying all over the place, and then Darth Vader comes through the middle of it. Nobody hits him. He didn't get hit, did he?
Right. It's true.
And he's the biggest target of the lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's part and parcel of the whole kind of. I mean, you watch the true origin. I think of it's like a cowboy western, isn't it? It's a space western, and you watch
sure.
western films. You've got hundreds of Indians falling on the floor, or the bad guys. The bad guys wearing the black hats. There's the ranchers are huddling, and the guy, we're going to take your rod, and some fighting, shooting, and then somebody like Gary Cooper appears and zaps them all.
Yeah,
It's a similar kind of idea, and I
right.
think you kind of if we try to dive into that too seriously and think, oh, there's so many stormtroopers. If they were all bloody good shots, we wouldn't have a film, would we? But
That's
we
true.
wouldn't. Would we?
Yes, the odds are certainly stacked.
I mean, just enjoy the heroics of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, another thing that I thought when Alec Guinness was interviewed by Michael Parkinson on BBC, one of the things he did say is, when he first got the script, he wasn't impressed with it, but it was a page turner, and because it was a page turner, he thought it was interesting. He said the great thing about the film was that there's lots of zapping and lots of terrible things happening, and people being, but you don't actually. It's not gruesome. It's not
Right.
all blood and gore. It's not like a samurai movie or a
Yeah.
Terminator movie, even, or any of the. It's not like the Vikings or something. It has that element about it because, let's face it, underneath it all, it's still. I like to think of it as a children's story for adults. Really,
Yeah.
they can enjoy it without. And I've been to enough conventions uh, to have enjoyed the vision of seeing 20 or 30 beautiful young ladies dressed in Princess Leia's slave outfit. That's
Yes.
very pleasing on the eye. But in the original movies, there's none of the sauciness we associate with, say, Flash Gordon or other films. And I think that's again because there's an innocence about that, and I don't think we should take that away. It's I think what happens is something creates something wonderful uh, that becomes something else, and then we go back and revisit it, and we sometimes add the edge to it that's not part of its charm,
Right.
or another part of its charm, which gets back to the people in suits, is I didn't particularly personally like the prequels that much.
Okay.
And the reason for that was this is a previous time, but the animation is far more advanced than the original movies were. So there's that kind of clash in my mind as I'm watching it. But the other thing is, part of the charm of Star Wars for the audience is the fact that behind all these silly costumes is a person. There are actors in there. They may look like and they may be looking like that, but there's an actor in there. It's not a CGI.
Right.
So when we came to The Force Awakens, of course, we then go back to having actors in costumes, which it brings the charm back.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, uh, when The Force Awakens opened in my home city of Colchester, I was invited to do some, signing a few autographs and meeting people. And there's a local Star Wars reenactors society that's quite well known. They were invited, and I was invited with them to go and see the movie in 3D. Oh, we had a problem kick-starting it because the lining. Anyway, we got it started, and I watched it. And there were middle-aged men in the cinema, watching The Force Awakens, and you could actually hear them crying when
Wow.
Chewbacca and Han Solo appeared. They were crying because every childhood memory they had, everything that had made them what they did, they're interested in Star Wars. It all started with those first films, and the relationship between Chewbacca and Han Solo was vitally important to them. And to
Yeah.
see these two guys back on the screen was fascinating and fabulous for them.
Yeah.
And you can look at that and think, oh, what, grown men ought to behave themselves, but no, it's because you're seeing something from your childhood and it's still with you.
Right.
And I just found that incredibly moving, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a hard scene when Han Solo, fell off the platform and
Oh,
Chewie was looking on. That was a
yeah.
tough one. Yeah. It brings you back, like you said.
it does. Yeah.
The movie magic. Obviously, they can make it look like there are 1,000 stormtroopers on
Yeah.
set, but you being there, you being one of them, how many typically stormtrooper actors would there be at a time together?
Oh, it depends where you were.
Yeah,
Um, I'm pretty. I think there were, the carbon chamber was an example. We had a number of stormtroopers up there, quite a few of whom were stuntmen because they fly off the edge on a few occasions, and we had others who came in at various stages. That they were by and large people. The arrival of the Emperor and Darth Vader, the big arrival. This is when the matte paintings come in. I mean, we're not talking about CGI. We're talking about people who are who are painting minute images on a gel that's then shot behind the camera that's lined up with the original footage, and you can't tell where the join is. So I think in that sequence, it looks like there's about 100 stormtroopers. I think there were about 20 of us, if that. There might have been about a dozen of us.
wow.
Now I have my own views on, we should have, one part we wish every stormtrooper should be a stormtrooper. It's not practical.
Right.
It's not practical. Um, I just think that's just fantastic stuff. I guess what worries me again, as I said about with the prequels when they didn't have the people in the costumes, is there are characters that when they are in significant positions, they need to be played by actors. I mean, mind having said that, uh, a friend of mine plays Snoke.
Oh, yes.
Ross Sandbridge, 7'2", 7'3" actor. They put him in a costume. He's the body for the Snoke character.
Wow.
He animated around him, and of course Anthony Hurkis did the voice. And that is occasion the point in that he's a creature actor. And that then becomes embodied through technology. So there's still an actor in there.
Yeah.
Well, I remember watching the Titanic, and I'm not suggesting you can make a whole ship. I'm not suggesting you put thousands of extras on it, but this was the fairly early days, I think, of this kind of technology. And if you look at the sequence when it's basically an aerial shot of the Titanic, you've got little ants moving around. They don't look like people. They look like little ants moving around. They're not ants, obviously, they're people. So there are times, if you're going to do these things, they've got to be done well. Star Wars does it brilliantly.
Yeah.
Even in the moments where there's a bit of tongue in cheek going on,
Right.
like the moments when you see there's all the rockets, and there's these big space cruisers and the rockets are coming in, and there's little things, and in the middle of that you're flying twirling through the air somewhere, and there's a pizza.
Yeah. Yeah.
we know the story.
Yeah.
That's part of the charm of it. I don't think we can take that too seriously. It's
Right.
part of the charm. It's the sort of thing they do in Star Trek as well. I mean, they have their moments. Um, Star Wars, of course, is different to Star Trek. Star Trek, the main difference is Star Wars takes place in a galaxy far, far away. The crew of the Enterprise came from Earth. Well, most of them did, apart from the Vulcan and some of the other characters. But Captain Kirk's an Earthling.
Right.
So's McCoy. So's the science officer. So there is a distinctive difference that when you watch Star Trek and the evolution of technology within Star Trek, you're watching the evolution of mankind.
Yeah.
When you watch Star Wars, you're watching other creatures from different worlds. Unfortunately, in order for us to appreciate them and be able to communicate with them, they have a remarkable similarity to us.
Right.
Because
Now,
if you made a film, pools of jelly moving along, that sentient pools of jelly, it not necessarily make good entertainment.
this is right.
But though, having said that, funnily enough, that one of the joys of streaming is you get the opportunity to go back and look at old 60s series. Now, when I was a kid, another series that we got from the States was The Outer Limits,
Oh, yes.
black and white series, and then went colour. And I only have vaguely remember. I remember it was quite influence. It was quite an effect on me, but I don't remember too much about it. Going back and watching that series, I realised how good it was. Some of the philosophy, some of the ideas in it, and of course, In one you get Leonard Nimoy playing a character not dissimilar to, although he's an Earthman, not dissimilar to what Spock is. And there's a fighter pilot played by William Shatner, who is very, very close to what Captain Kirk was. So you can kind of see that. You can actually almost see the evolution of those characters through other things the actors did. And that to me is fascinating as well.
Sure.
And I am a Star Wars. Choose between Star Wars and Star Trek, I would choose Star Wars, but I like Star Trek.
Now, famously, Empire Strikes Back tends to be the most popular of the franchise. A lot of people seem to choose that one as their favorite. Growing up as a kid, my favorite was always Return of the Jedi. I always enjoyed the heels, the creatures. I always enjoyed all the different characters, and there seemed to be more of that in Return of the Jedi with Jabba's palace. As an actor in both Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, what did you prefer as far as just your experience on both of those films? Was one better than the other?
Ah, as an actor, oh gosh, I had less to do on the Return of the Jedi. Um, I, I I think there were some very interesting, engaging characters in Return of the Jedi. Characters that were played by what I call little people, um, who were incredibly engaging, and they brought a certain magic to it that went beyond the whole space thing, which were the Ewoks, of course.
Oh yeah,
Now, there are people who don't like Ewoks; they thought it unnecessary, you know. But I think having actors of different sizes brings another flavour to it. And of course, Kenny was both an Ewok, and of course he was R2D2. And Warwick is a phenomenal guy. Wasn't intended to be Wicket, but Kenny was ill and he became Wicket. And we all know that that moment, he's embraced it. He's learned. And the incredible thing I found about Warwick was he wanted to pursue acting properly. In a time when they were saying, "Well, you can't really do that," you're small people who get small people parts. He formed his own theatre company where they all played the classics.
yeah,
So if they're all small and they're all playing the classics and they all look like that, the audience forgets the fact they are for the duration and enjoys them for acting. And of course, we've seen with Game of Thrones that actors who are small can be absolutely brilliant.
yeah,
And I think there is a magic in Return of the Jedi. There's a different kind of magic, and those are the scenes with the Ewoks.
yeah. I think that
Which
the
one do I?
Ewoks brought a great element to
But
the movie.
unfortunately, I didn't have any scenes with them really, because the scenes in the Redwood Forest, sorry, the scenes on Endor were filmed in the Redwood Forest. However, there were some scenes at Endor docking station that were filmed at Elstree, and one of those, of course, as you know, was Luke's surrender, his partial surrender when he was trying to get to Darth Vader. And I'm one of those shots. I'm one of the stormtroopers that arrests him.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And of course, the other sequences I've told you about. Um, I guess I enjoyed doing the Empire because I was used more.
Sure.
Um, but I wouldn't say it was comfortable. I would never say those are comfortable. And But they were fun. There's the sequence when the stormtroopers charging one end of Hoth, and they're fighting at the rebel soldiers are running out the other end. It's fun to be in both of those. So one moment you're shooting at yourself, and one moment you're shooting back at yourself. That's actually quite a funny place to be. That's quite enjoyable to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a sequence where they're throwing polystyrene down on top of the rebels running at the doors.
Yeah.
And I vowed that if one of these things hit me on the head, I'd go, "Yeah!" It didn't. So I didn't get a chance to prove my acting as a dying rebel.
Now you mentioned Kenny
Yeah,
Baker.
sorry.
I was going to say you
Yeah,
mentioned Kenny Baker. What was he like to work with?
I didn't have a lot of working with Kenny because of the nature of what I was doing, what he was doing. But as a person, I met him a few times at signings and got to know him really quite well. And one of the things he would gladly sign anything for anybody. He was very sociable, very nice person, and people started ripping him off. So he'd sign autographs for anybody, and then they'd flog them on eBay at some ridiculous price and institute.
Uh,
And we know that within the whole signing thing, there's a lot of profiteers, commercializing goes on, and that upset him. But apart from that, he was just a joy. He was such a funny bloke. He was a very. I would love to have done pantomime with him, but I never got the opportunity. I've done quite a lot of pantomime, but I never got the opportunity to work with Kenny. And every single one of those guys is sweet. They're really nice guys, all of them. And it, it it, it irks me, to be honest with you, Joseph. It irks me a little bit when people make this thing about, we shouldn't be putting on performances of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs because it's degrading to small people. You ask small actors to do it and make a living from it, whether they think it's degrading. They're really good characters they play, and then that's a guaranteed Christmas act for some of them. It's a guaranteed income, and they enjoy it. I think it's unfortunate. I don't think people patronise people in the wrong way sometimes. Not that it's ever right to patronise anybody in any way, but I think to think of somebody's being degraded because they're playing a character that's part of it's a treasure. Um, where I did have a lot of sympathy was when we were doing the Carbon Chamber, because the little Ugnaught characters in there were. I mean, it was terrible. Absolutely, it was so hot. It was uncomfortable. We were 15 to 20 foot above the ground, and the steam and everything else. And we'd had to kept taking the breaks. It went on and on. That sequence was terrible, and the people who really suffered were the little people because they had those costumes on. It was bad enough we could take a helmet on, but they could get out of those things very easily. Um, yeah, so I think from a personal perspective, I much preferred the Empire Strikes Back. From terms of the characters you meet and the way it developed, I do like Return of the Jedi.
yeah. Any personal memories of Jeremy Bulloch, the late Jeremy Bulloch?
Um, Jeremy was. I didn't get a lot of conversation with Jeremy during filming. I met him a few times over the years, and there was one um, image that sticks in my mind simply because I found it a little bit. I'd never experienced this before because I'm not a well-known actor. I'm not. I'm just a working, jobbing actor. Always, that's all I've ever been. Um, but we lost David and we lost Jeremy within a week of each other. And at one point, the three of us were at a signing had signed these photographs of Boba Fett, Darth Vader, and a Stormtrooper. And I happened to be the one signing that. On Facebook, that picture appeared, with things like, when's this guy going? Because I think Dave was 85, Jeremy was 75, and at that particular point I was 65. And I found that was, it's a bit of a shock because I never really thought of myself in that way. He's dead, where's he going?
Oh boy,
And
yeah.
I was quite shaken by that. Um, I didn't have a lot of conversations with Jeremy. I did a few shots with him. Obviously, I did the Charbon Chamber. He was just a modest guy. He was just a gentleman. I mean, but totally different character to Dave, but equally nice.
Yeah.
These are guys you quite happily be friends with if you had the opportunity to be with them for a long time. Yeah, I mean, I didn't, as I say, I didn't really get to know him too well because most of my scenes were with Dave, but the Carbon Chamber, and there's the Bespin corridor one where he's actually out of costume and he's a desk officer. Well, he's an officer, and it's with we're escorting Princess Leia.
That's right.
Yeah, I just found him a very pleasant person. He seems like an open person. I just didn't get to know him that well,
And you've
but I
mentioned a
liked
few times the conventions as well. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the different comic cons or conventions that you've been to, and what have the fan interactions been like for you?
Okay. I don't do as many of the big ones as a lot of my peers do, for the simple reason is as I say, I had this cancer. It's rather restricted. I can't, for example, I get invitations to go to. This is a touching point, Kester, but Abby in Japan invited me to go to Japan. I couldn't go, so he came to England to see me.
Oh,
I just, and he brought his daughter with him. I mean, not just to see me, to see some of the English actors. I had invitations to go to Tino in Holland and places, and I can't. I don't want to go into the lyric details. I can't fly. I don't want to go into the lyric details, and I can't go to Orlando. So I've done those ones. I've done some of the big ones in London and England. They're each different. My personal preference is it's a bit like I like to meet people. I like to, let's have a sat and have a chat about somebody. And when people come and say, "Can I thought I loved this part. How did it happen?" And I will tell them how we filmed something if I can remember it. And then I'll ask them about themselves, and I find it fascinating to find out about what their interests are, what their lives are like, because that's what human exchange should be about. When you get the big ones, that when you've got massive arena, you get a queue, and you get somebody collecting the money. It almost desensitizes that process to me. So although you can make a little bit of money, I'm more interested in the small ones. The ones that are linked to charities. I do a lot of the charity ones. So I do a lot of the small ones. The fans are the same, and fans will come and see you. They'll contact you. They'll come online and say, "Are you going to be in that convention? Because I need you to sign this for me." And I also get fans who send me things. I'm a member of Sci-Fi Signers. I get things through that. I also get things through my website, through my agent. People, a lot of young people will write to me. I've done this, that, and the other, and I like to find out about them. I like to find what their interests are, because to my mind, that is important. And the most important thing to me is our funding are for the cosplayers, and the cosplayers are important to me because they really are the ones that keep the legacy alive. Little boy, 6 years old, sees this old man sitting behind a desk, and his dad says, "This man, see him? He's the man in the photograph." Or him? No, he's not. He is. Because there's a guy in a costume standing over there, and that's where the kids want to be. They want to be with Darth Vader. They want to be with Boba Fett. They want to be with the Stormtroopers. That's fine. By me, it's fine. Because the cosplayers that are doing all this generally are raising money for cancer research, heart foundations, animal rescues, all the good causes you can possibly imagine. I was on the Empire Strikes Back for a few months. I was on the Return of the Jedi for a few weeks. I never, in full costume, abseiled down the side of a building.
right.
These cosplayers do that sort of thing. They do so much good. And one of the joys for me of being in this whole thing at all is to realise that part of the legacy, and to my mind, it's a really important part of the legacy, is the good that is done under the name of Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's something we should all be proud of. I really think so.
Yeah. And
Are we
outside,
running out of time?
we've got about 5 minutes here.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Outside of the different franchises, you've done a lot of different franchises. Obviously, you've been a
I have.
part
Yeah.
of not only
Yeah.
Star Wars but Doctor Who and Flash Gordon and Superman. Is there a favorite project film wise beyond Star Wars for you?
Well, I mean, acting wise,
Yeah,
or film wise.
yeah,
Oh, well, apart from Johnny, because I love being Johnny. In the theatre, I think it was in the 80s when I had my own theatre company. I played King Lear and won an award for it. Actually, 24 years old playing King Lear was quite an achievement for me. I've enjoyed some of the stuff I've done in the theatre. Like I wrote a project for elderly people, one man show called Who's Leonard Jones, and it took it all over East Anglia. That's quite rewarding. I've done a lot of Shakespeare over the years. That's been rewarding. I've done pantomime. In terms of film, which was I would say I quite enjoyed doing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I actually quite enjoyed doing Blake's Feathern when I was in makeup for about 7 hours, covered head to foot in this stuff. That's fun. Um, Done small parts in TV. I guess of the films, the two that come to mind. One was Flash Gordon. I didn't have a lot to do in Flash Gordon, but the girls are beautiful, and I was young. I won't say any more than that. There were just so many of them. And Moonraker. When I really got to meet Roger Moore, we were filming in two studios outside Paris. And that was great fun. I was one of Drax's men. And we went back, but this is the interesting one. We went back to Pinewood to do some pickup shots and some of the insets. And one of these is the big thing when the Moonraker first appears, which is basically the shuttle. Well, the shuttle's not there, it's done later, added as an effect. But I got my first piece of Bond direction. I was wearing a tight suit. I had to jump into frame, run the whole length of the studio with the camera following my backside. I was quite skinny, wobbling down there, jumping into the back of a mini moat, going down there. The idea was to show the sheer size of the Moonraker.
Wow.
When they filmed it, I was wearing a different cold costume to the one I wore in Paris. This was a little snug. And I had my direction. All the extras are told to get run. I to this is me, Ralph. Action. I jump into flame. I jump into frame from a raised area. Right, and I get a whiff of wind up my derriere. I only spit my costume. And when the film came out, you don't see that. You just see the end of it when I'm scouched by the machine. All that run's gone, probably because my backside was in full view of the audience. That's that. But that's not even the funniest one. The funniest one was that we were in the canteen at Pinewood, well, there was a restaurant. And there was a guy, it was his first day on a film set, and he was 18 years of age. And we wound him up. We said, you go and see Roger Moore. You go and tell Roger Moore it's your birthday, it's your first day on a film set. He'll buy you a drink. And we wound him up. And this poor kid, he went up and said to Roger Moore, I had my first day, I'm 18, and you buy me a drink. And Roger Moore bought him a drink, bought him something to eat as well, chatted with him, gave the guy the day of his life.
Yeah.
On his way out, Roger Moore comes over to us and said, you're enjoying yourselves, are you? And I thought, he could have been really nasty about it. He took it in. And that was one of all the people I worked with, he was one of the funniest ones to work with.
Wow.
Even though it's only I did 3 Bond films, it was only Moonraker I got to know him. And he's just a joy. I think if there's a highlight, it's working with Roger Moore.
That's great.
Yeah.
And in closing, fast forward many years from now, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I don't. How do I want to be remembered? For not dying, probably. That's a Woody Allen joke. I can't even claim that. I don't know really. I think as a good fella. I think it's I think if on my tomb he said he was a good fella, and that's not much of a legacy maybe, but be thought of as that it's just when somebody goes, it'd be rather nice if they were remembered. It's the old Shakespeare thing, isn't it? The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Let it so be with Caesar, or the other way round. It'd be nice if somebody can be remembered as okay. He might have been a bit of a div. He may not have been very talented. He may not be very good looking. He can't sing and can't play the guitar, but he wasn't a bad bloke. That's probably our best way to be remembered. He wasn't a bad bloke.
I think it's better to be remembered while you're here. So I first and foremost want to thank you for your body of work and all of the great things that you've been a part of, and it didn't go unrecognized. So really appreciate all your work and contributions.
And there's always videos on the YouTube channel. Oh, the secrets out there as well on the video channel. And 15th of November, the documentary comes out. I'm plugging myself, aren't I?
Oh, go right ahead. Anything
Lovely
else
speaking,
you'd like to say to
lovely
the
speaking
fans?
with you, Joseph. And thank you to the fans who are watching.
Absolutely. For the great Ralph Morse, I am Joseph Bruen. This has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. It's the Sci-Fi Week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we thank you so much for joining us, Ralph.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody. May your force go with you.